Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Um, Welcome to a special live Writing the Feature workshop, where we're going to be talking about the course that's open right now, Writing the Feature, and also get a little bit into a workshop about one of the most important tools that we have in the course, called the tentpole document. And we're going to be also touching on a new offering that we've got going on called script consulting. So we're going to be touching on everything, answering all your questions, getting into it.
On how
So
to get the most out of the course.
yes, that's the main thing, is how to get the most out of the course, how to know if it's right for you right now, if there's anything you should do first, that kind of stuff. So, this is kind of a good question to start with, I think, from Richard, to talk about going, like, how should you go into this course? So Richard says, for a course like this, should you already have a fully formed idea, or is there time to develop one within the framework of the course? Thanks.
Yeah, so it depends on how fully formed the idea is. I think if you've never written a screenplay before, you should and even if maybe you've written one or two and you want to get the most out of this course, I would highly recommend not having a fully formed idea and to writing an idea specific with the course, right? Like coming up with every stage, every week, you're going to take one aspect of the outlining and of the idea creation process. And if you are constantly relating that back to decisions you've already made and choices you've already made, you might not you might not get all of John's insight and perspective imbued into that idea because you've already made choices. You've already made choices about who this story is about, what happens to them, and why it's important. Then this course is fundamentally John's NYU course, advanced screenwriting course, and from the beginning of what is this idea, who's the story about, to having a finished screenplay, he'll walk you through how he approaches a beat sheet, outlining, making those choices. And if you have an idea along with learning that process, you'll probably learn more about the process than if you've already made choices and you're just trying to insert your something that's already been worked on into that process.
Absolutely. So something that we say is that this is really a course that's nothing to a screenplay. So you can come in with absolutely nothing, and we're going to be working through the steps to help you develop an idea, and choose your characters and things like that. So I think that in a way, it's like you don't have to come in with a fully formed idea. And in a way, we almost don't recommend that you have something that you're really stuck to. Like something that's really hard for people, like what Adam was saying, is if somebody comes in and they say, I'm going to adopt a novel in this course, which is possible. But if it's your first time writing a screenplay, especially, or if you're still sort of new at it, coming in with something that's that strict and like that's that locked can actually make it a little bit more difficult. So something that we recommend when people are asking for ideas, and I think that this is actually in the course a little bit, if I'm remembering right, is we actually recommend that you come in and you do something fun, that you do something that is a movie that you wish existed in the world, that you would go see today, that is something that is just, that you just enjoy it. So while you can do whatever you like, we certainly won't stop you. We recommend against coming in adapting a novel. We recommend against coming in saying this is a story that really happened to me and this is going to be like my life's work right now. We really recommend coming into this with something, with a flexible idea that gets you excited, that you're willing to play with and adapt and change and see changes happen to as you go through the process. So I hope that
Totally. It's also, you don't have to come in with nothing. You don't necessarily have to come in. You can come in with maybe a notion for an idea, or maybe like two ideas you're stuck between. Like be the best way to approach learning any new approach to creative forms is to have flexibility and to be loose. You can come in with something you've worked on before. Just be open to reinventing it and changing your point of view on the work, so you can have a learning mind rather than, well, this doesn't fit the story I'm working on set. Yeah, let's walk through the basic layout of the course and what each week sort of covers.
Yeah, so this is the full course. This is what it looks like when you get inside, and basically you have a week open to you every week. And to go ahead and address this point, yes, you have access to everything forever. So stuff opens up to you 1 week at a time, but once it's open, you never lose access. You can go back to it anytime. We have a lot of writers go through the process and then will frequently circle back to the same videos, watch them a bunch of different times. Or people buy the course, realize they don't have time, and come back to it a year or two later. All of that is totally fine. You can still submit.
Or you buy the course, feedback. You take the first 2 weeks and don't feel like it's for you, you get a full refund. So even if you're feeling on the fence about it, you can always do that. Up to the first 2 weeks, you can get a refund on. And in our entire history, only one person has ever refunded the course. And the reason they gave it was they just already knew it. They already knew the stuff. Yeah. So you can't begrudge people on that. So we're a little proud of that particular number, but it's totally open.
Yep. Agreed.
All your money back.
And if you look here,
we'll make the font larger, Alexie.
Yeah, I'll see if I can
just zoom in a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. Can we zoom out to the first, the macro view?
Photo show. Let's see. Oh, come on. Here we go. So this is the course. This is what you're going to see in your first week. And you should be able to, on the sales page, you should be able to see what all the different titles are for each week. We don't have those, as far as I know, those are available. So you can see the question you're going to get answered in each little video. So this is an example. This is week 1. And you can see right here for Richard's question that in week 1, we do have a whole section dedicated to how do you generate ideas.
Go to week 2.
Yep, let's take a peek.
So for week 1 is 2. Who's the protagonist? What do they want? And how do you form ideas around a central protagonist? John's philosophy of screenwriting is protagonist centric. Finding the character, finding their flaw, finding the obstacles for the characters, building out the story from that mechanism. It's definitely better. It's closer. And week 2 focuses on why can't the protagonist have the thing they want? What are the things in the world, whether it's their own flaw that's holding them back, obstacles, a strong antagonist that creates conflict, meaningful conflict in terms of belief and in situation, coming up with a strong dramatic situation, framing your idea from those elements and asking those questions. Very simple, you say, well, week 1's who's your protagonist and what do they want? Week 2 is why can't your protagonist have it? The questions that are asked of the idea in those 2 weeks aren't just, okay, who is this about? And why does it matter? What's holding them back? What do they define or what do they love? These questions you might have a concept of, I want to tell a story about zombies in space, right? But approaching this lens to that will get you to not just character development and fleshing out the themes of your story, but the meaningful points of plot development that come from character. And that's why John's perspective is protagonist centric, because everything comes from that bedrock. And when everything comes from that bedrock, so much internal consistency and the work feels of a piece, because you've asked a clear line of questioning. Well, who's this about? What's wrong with their life? All these questions that you can really, you'll feel solid with the plot after you've really done that work. And that's why we framed the first 2 weeks that way. Oh, this is a good question. Can you guys explain how you give feedback each week? So we don't give feedback every week, but there are 2 assignments in the course that we give written feedback on. The first, the work you submit, specifically the first assignment at the end of week 2, is a log line and a list of obstacles in the story. and we'll give feedback on the log line. And the obstacle list is less important, but fundamentally it's like sort of like not just the log line, but the story idea represented by the log line. Is this a movie? Does this work? So early on, we give that feedback. And later on in the course, I think around week 6 or week 8, we give feedback on the outline for the course.
Yep.
So like the beat sheet, basically, which we frame as called a tentpole document, which is the whole act structure, everything that happens in every act, and the thematic development. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
it's an email. You email me and I will give you written feedback.
Yep. You email feedback, who is Adam, and Adam will go through and get you some notes. But something that you can do is that we also have a Discord, and you can submit or talk about anything you're doing at any time in the Discord, and people are pretty good about, yep, there's Theo mentioning it. People are pretty good about getting back to you. So it's really, that's the 2 locked in opportunities that you'll have throughout the course. But in addition to that, you have access to our Discord, which you have access to now. I'll put that link here. It should always be in the description of videos, but let me include that. Free community where we have to hang out.
Yes, with people who are taking the course with you, but also people in the larger young screenwriters community. We really want this to be a space for people not just to share their work, but to, make connections with other writers. But let's go back to week 3.
Yep. Here we go.
So we've covered in week 1, who's your protagonist and what do they want? 2, what is standing in your protagonist's way, whether it's their flaw and the antagonist of their life, like the big elements of story about like the character the story's about, the forces that are against them. And week 3, we get into plot structure and specifically what we call the tentpole document, which is our framing device to teach structure to people. But fundamentally, week 3 is about what forces your protagonist to act, which is in Act 1, the inciting incident, the objective of that will sustain them through all of Act 2, the setup of what is their status quo in life, what is that as it manifests as their flaw, what disrupts that, the inciting incident, and what do they do once that catalyst pushes them into action. This is really, universally fundamental and important stuff for how to set up stories. Even outside of movie screenplay concept, this is kind of like, once you've answered that the previous questions of who's the story about and what stands in their way, Act 1 of anything in any medium is setting that up in a way that's logical and digestible to people, where they understand not just, oh, who is this about and why should I care? It's, who is this about? Why should I care what happens to them? And why is this person worth listening to? Like, why do I want to spend time with this person? The first 15 minutes of your movie that win somebody over, like that, the mechanisms of sticking an audience into a protagonist and making them care about them enough to sustain you for a whole story. That's all here. That's the work you do here. And we also focus on some larger philosophical aspects of Act 1, sort of complexity in a story versus depth, adding more elements versus having fewer elements, and focusing and deepening those elements, whether that's number of characters, number of plot developments. There's a lot of stuff that happens in week 3, and it's very important.
So something I wanted to try to touch on a little bit is sort of, what is the young screen, like what is the philosophy that you're going to be learning? And I know that Adam talked before about how it's super protagonist centric. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about John. And like how he came up with this and how this came to be, and like what his theory is and how it relates to all the other theories of screenwriting and everybody else's stuff that you'll encounter. So basically the origin of this course was that I went to NYU. Tish, John was my professor all 4 years, and he is a professional screenwriter, producer, He was the head of sorry, I'm blanking on his NYU term, but anyway, he did screenwriting classes at NYU for the undergrads, and he was like one of the favorite teachers ever. So he basically, in order to learn screenwriting way back when, he would go through scripts. This was before like the Sid Field and all those books. He would go through scripts at AFI, and he would write down on a yellow legal pad what were the big moments that happened in the script, like what were the big key elements that happened in scripts. And every single day he would read a script, write down the key elements that happened, and go on. And so that over time helped develop his understanding of, okay, this is what happens in every single script. He started noticing patterns of like, okay, we break into this around page 20. We have an inciting incident here. The midpoint is something that completely sets the protagonist back to ground zero. What are these story elements that keep showing up every single time? And so writing the feature is really everything that he learned himself and developed and put into his NYU course, succinctly and in a package for you on the internet. Let's see. So basically, in order to, we shot this during the pandemic with John, where we had him sort of to ourselves. And the way that we did it is me and Adam sat with him, and he basically took us through his entire NYU course, which is a year-long advanced screenwriting course. And we filmed him. And in addition to that, an advantage that we got that I didn't get when I was going through it at NYU is to really push him to explain his understanding and philosophy and to ask super deep questions to try to fully cement down like, okay, what is happening and why. So not just like, this is the rule of screenwriting, right? None of this is rules. It's all just understanding an organic storytelling mechanism. And so understanding why things are connected more than just, somebody has to die on page 17 of every single screenplay. It's like, that's not how this goes. This is more about, okay, the protagonist must want something, right? And this is why. And their flaw is not just something completely unrelated. Their flaw is something that is being tested throughout the entire second act. It's something that they're coming up against because why? It's not because it's a random screenwriting rule. It's because for people to change, it's hard. People don't change for no reason. So in order to show a character arc, to show change, you have to test your protagonist. Anyway, that's kind of what I love about this personally, is that it helps you really understand the why of storytelling. And when you put storytelling into a 90-minute structure, it tends to take a certain shape, but this applies to all types of storytelling, as Adam was saying. This applies to books. It can apply to short form. It can apply to, in a way it applies to TV. It's actually pretty, the overall shape of it is pretty similar. It's a great understanding to have.
For sure.
So, yeah. So also something to say that, like, if you've taken writing the short with us, which is a free course, and I highly recommend you take a peek at it to see if you like our style of teaching and everything like that. That one's also with John. Everything is super, as Adam said, protagonist centric, but also focused on creating work. So it's not just giving you the philosophy. It's actually saying, okay, now tangibly, what is the next step? What do you do to take this information and put it into action? It's not like we just tell you things and say, okay, have fun. We push you out of the nest, write your script. Instead, it's that you're getting step by step building your story with us through specific instructions. So you go from log line, you go from an idea to a log line, just sort of like a pitch, like a longer synthesis of your story. You start developing that out into a tentpole document. You flesh out your tentpole document into a more detailed beat sheet. You put everything on note cards, and then you start writing out your actual screenplay. So there's never a point in this process where you're like, I don't know what to physically do. Every single thing is laid out for you in terms of steps. Adam, did you want to continue going through the order of the course?
Yeah, sure. So week 1, again, is who's your protagonist? What do they want? Week 2 is why can't your protagonist have it, which is sort of the forces against them, like their flaw and antagonist. And, those first 2 weeks are the plot, the elements that will sustain the plot and the movie will fundamentally focus and go deep with. From a protagonist point of view, everything that the protagonist is putting forward and being pushed against. In week 3, we focus on how those aspects interact in Act 1, specifically in the layout of in the layout of the movie. Sort of not just who is this about, but what happens to them and what do they do about it, right? Like we have our protagonist flaw, we have our antagonist. We know kind of the big pictures, the big story elements that will sustain the movie, but we have to ask in the context of the film, well, what are they going to do? What's their objective? What's their thing that what's their normal world? What disrupts that normal world? And what is the new world that's going to propel them into Act 2? So let's go to week 4. And we decided to cut Act 2 into 2 pieces, which I think is a very good way to sort of think about Act 2. A lot of people consider it as this big monolith that they get stuck on, but in this course we cut it in half at the midpoint, because the midpoint is the big dynamic shift that happens in a movie. One of the most important beats in a movie that almost all people agree is fundamental to the movie experience. Halfway through, something huge happens, and we cut Act 2 into 2 parts. So if you say like, okay, Act 1 is the normal world that's disrupted by the inciting incident. Act 2 is where the protagonist is going after their objective, the new world, right? That is caused by the inciting incident. The protagonist acting. They've been forced to act. Act 2 is when they act to go after the thing they want. But when we cut it in 2, at the midpoint, they're going after the thing they want. The midpoint changes the way they go about the thing they want. So the first half of Act 2, you have a protagonist pushing and pushing and pushing for the thing they want most. The midpoint changes their approach. They're still going after the thing, but it has to be a dynamic shift in the tone of the movie. Let's say a classic example is Star Wars: A New Hope. The objective is we got to deliver these droids to the rebel base. And once Act 1 ends and Luke's uncle and aunt are dead, he tells Obi-Wan, I'm going to go with you. We're going to go deliver these droids. The first half of Act 2, they're in Mos Eisley. They're all these, weird aliens. They have to get a ship captain. They get the ship captain, but they're being followed by the what's called stormtroopers. And when they finally are almost about to arrive at Alderaan, the midpoint, oh my God, Alderaan was blown up. We got to go to the other rebel base. Like that changes the nature of their problem. At first, they were just, we're going to get on a ship. We're going to go to the place. Yeah, it might be hard to get a ship, but we're going to go. After the midpoint, they're trapped on the Death Star. They have to get out. Like they're not just trying to go to the rebel base. They have to escape the belly of the beast, right? And so the reason why I'm giving that example is when you cut Act 2 in 2 pieces, the first half of Act 2 is one type of problem, one type of push for an objective. And you cut it in half after the midpoint, you make the midpoint more powerful by designing the plot, because the midpoint can't just be a big thing that happens and then the protagonist goes about their way. It's a big thing that happens and forces the entire plot to change as a reaction. If you do that, if you're making that choice, if you're designing your movie around that, you can't help but make the midpoint important. And I've seen a lot of scripts that are like, they have a big reveal at the midpoint, but they're a big reveal that doesn't necessarily change the status quo of how the plot's working and how the protagonist is going after what they're trying to go after.
So here, I wanna show you all something. I just shared a link to something that we call the Vault, which is available to you whether you take the course or not. You can poke around in there. It's where we keep a ton of scripts. So just like hundreds of scripts, hundreds of development documents, hundreds of pilots and episodes, and also tentpole documents that we've made in the past. So for example, this is one that I just pulled up. You can see that there's a lot in here. I pulled up the one for Lady Bird. And so, for example, the midpoint here, it's something where the protagonist is going towards their objective and they basically are finally getting into a groove. They're finally understanding how this new world works. You're like, okay, this might work. And then you rip the rug out from underneath them. So the Lady Bird does a common one where they take somebody away. So at the midpoint, she has her friend break up with Julie. It's also really common to have a death there or like a betrayal reveal. It's basically that it launches them into a second new world where now their objective is the same, but it's going to be twice as hard. The things that they've gotten used to have been completely changed. So then we can just take a peek at quite a few of these. Train to Busan, it was that the father and the daughter were separated. They were at first trying to get
He's
to
at the back of the train. Yeah.
They were trying to get to the part they were trying to get to the safe part of the train, and then now father and daughter are separated. The objective is the same, but there is a wrench thrown in everything. And if you go through these, you can see that this is a lot of times, even when you think that a movie's not going to have it, if you're like, my favorite movie doesn't do that, you start breaking it down, you realize it consistently happens. Because that's just kind of the nature of story. In order to have a story that's going to occupy 90 minutes, to keep that momentum up, to raise the stakes continuously, to keep pushing your protagonist to a new place so they can eventually change, it becomes necessary for something to happen around the middle that makes everything so much worse and takes away the advantages that they've gotten. So that's the midpoint theory that we've got going on.
And also just to add on to that, lots of people talk about midpoints. Lots of people talk about, these elements. What I like about John's point of view and the course is that it lays a clear connection between all of those elements where like there's a motivated logic to every choice connected to the other choices, right? Like based on questions about who is this about and why should I care influences what the midpoint's going to be. It's not just going to be an arbitrary event. It's going to be something that's connected to their objective. That's really hard. Like you're designing a movie based on like internally consistent logic and like questions that are important to the audience experience rather than, having the elements and then making arbitrary choices around those elements.
It's like, so I guess to say that another way, it's like, if you think about a midpoint, in theory, there's like 17 million options for what your midpoint could be. Like in Lady Bird, you could kill anyone. You could kill the mom. You could kill the dad. You could kill the brother. You could have her like get kicked out of school. There's all kinds of really, really fundamental ground shaking, like terrible things that could happen to her that would put her back at ground zero. And that's true. Like that is not incorrect. But when you go through this course and you start understanding the way that these pieces are supposed to relate to each other, you know that it has to connect to her flaw. It has to be specifically about something that is going to completely give her a new world. Like you understand the different ways that this element fits into the puzzle of your story, and then you start in your mind as the writer, you start realizing like, no, it doesn't really make sense. Like it doesn't make sense for me to kill the mom. They have to have their arc. It doesn't make sense for this. What's going to make most sense is taking away a super close ally. And all these pieces start working together. So it's not just telling you the theory, it's also telling you how all the pieces work together. So that is Act 2A and 2B. So the beginning of Act 2 and the end of Act 2, which brings us into Week 6 and Act 3.
Which is one of the most important acts. Basically, how does your protagonist transform? So you have the protagonist, their normal world, their flaw, and then Act 2, you have your protagonist, their objective, and the obstacles for that objective. Act 3 is the resolution of that flaw in Act 1. It's the completion of the promise of Act 1 of who's the story about, why should I care, what's wrong with them. You're really finishing those sentences, but like giving a completion to not just what's wrong with them, what did they learn? How did they become how did they become more whole? How did they become more broken? Where's the story going? How are you really completing this in a emotionally satisfying way? How does your protagonist overcome their flaw and embrace their inner need in a way that feels true? It's really hard to do. This is like the magic trick of storytelling, is ending the story as well. And so many shows struggle with this. It's not so many movies give you kind of like an obligatory ending, but like, the big art form is at completing those answers to those questions in a way that's surprising yet inevitable. That sounds like a contradiction, but that's the magic space you want to be in. Surprising but inevitable. We have some theories on that, which are you might find interesting if you get that far.
Yep, absolutely. And then after that, we really look into. So by this point, by the end of Week 6, you have really gone through all the beats that happen in your movie, but we don't leave you there, because there's still a lot to think about when translating this into a screenplay. That's sort of the story. That's the spine of your story. But then we're also going to go through how to plan out what connects these big moments. You might have like planned like, okay, this is the midpoint, this is the inciting incident, and I know that I have to establish these things in the beginning of Act 2, but how? Like, how do these events connect? Like, what scenes do I literally write? And so Week 7 starts getting into filling in the spaces in between. So how do you fill in the moments between these tentpole beats? What is carding? I knew that this drove me nuts when I was starting, is people kept saying like, card your script. I do this. I put them up on my wall and I can move them around. And I'm like, what do you literally put on your cards? Like I need to know. I want to know specifically, what do you do? And it's not saying this is the only way, but it's saying this is a technique that you can use, take and leave what works for you, but it's showing you literally what can go on your card in a way that's helpful for a lot of writers. So we really try to get into the nitty-gritty. And that one, as John's TA, I actually have like a camera down on my desk and I'm making cards as I go through Jojo Rabbit. So there's that. We go through things like, how do you track internal conflict using cards? How do you know what scenes even should make it into your movie? Yeah. How do you decide what's the opening and closing image of your movie? Making sequences. And this is also about where we recommend that you take our free course called Writing the Scene, which actually started as a module of writing the feature, but it became we realized that we have so many questions about the best practices for writing a scene and how to get the most emotionally out of scenes, that it was really its own standalone thing. So we pulled it out, made it its own free course, which we can share the link with you. So, yes.
And if you are unsure about writing the feature, take Writing the Scene, because it is a week of writing the feature. And if you really like writing the scene and think it's substantial and learn something from it, you'll probably get a lot out of writing the feature.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's a little behind the scenes secret, is that Writing the Scene was part of writing the feature. And you realize that, first off, so many people have questions about it that we wanted to make sure it was accessible to everyone. And also just that it was too big. We wanted to be able to give space to it. So this is, I think you should, let me just make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Yes, I am. Okay, so this is, by the way, just like Writing the Scene, where basically we talk about the foundations of scene writing, what it is. We talk about like literally what each element is, the formatting, but beyond that, like how to best use narrative description, how to best use dialogue. We answer technical questions that we get a lot, like how do you do dual dialogue, or how do you write sound coming from the TV, or how do you intercut between scenes, or how do you do a montage? How do you do stuff that's non-linear? How do you make your scenes read better on the page? How do you make a scene that's going to be like, you know, the little clip scene that they use for your Oscar moment? How do you make actors really enjoy what's happening in the scene? So we get into all of that here.
And in 3 and 4, I'll add, we cover every single technical element of what is on the page. Yeah. What's a slug line? How to best use one? What does dialogue look like? How do you use parentheticals the best way it's possible? You know, and in section 4, I have a bit where I have a really bad scene and I use the principles we talk about to punch it up and make it better. Just like easy things that you can do to, you know, like a filter you can put on, that just a filter of thought, I should say, an editorial process that you can consistently improve your drafts with.
We should say too that something to keep in mind with all of our courses, but writing the scene in particular, is that we're really looking at what is going to be the most effective for you to break in to Hollywood as a screenwriter. So like writing a spec script as someone who's trying to break into Hollywood. So that's important to keep in mind, because there's best practices that you follow as someone breaking in that maybe Quentin Tarantino doesn't follow anymore because he already has all the money and they're going to make whatever he wants. So we really are getting at basically writing a script for the blacklist. Like, how are you going to get a script that is going to be the most popular spec of the year?
Possible. Yeah. This is a good question. Helpful. Did you say that the scene course overlaps with this course but includes additional info? It doesn't overlap in the sense that it covers something completely different. Like it's very much it's a missing week of writing the feature, right? Like right before you finish outlining and carding. After you finish carding, but before you finish the first draft, we wanted this course to be everything you need to know about technical screenwriting before you had to write a first draft. And we pulled that out of writing the feature. So it fits with writing the feature and it's complementary to, but this is just good scene writing in general. And what I said about it fitting into the writing the feature is, if you like this course, you'll like writing the feature. If you hate this course, you'll hate writing the feature.
Yeah. Here, let me show you. So to show you kind of what we mean is just that it was going to end up being a few weeks, or like, I think it was going to, we were borderline two. Yeah, we wanted it to be 1 week, but we realized the material really was, we wanted it to go so in depth.
2 weeks of material from writing the feature.
So that's why we pulled it out.
For free.
But this is for free, so I'll just pop in and show you stuff. But like, we literally go into each parts of it, like how to do a title page, how to do scene headings, how to do scene description. And it's not just how to do it technically, even though this is called technical. It's also about literally what is it? Rules of style. Like, so writing scene description, we describe it as, this is your stand-in for the camera. Like, a script is a blueprint for somebody else to shoot or for you to shoot later. So that means that it's important to realize, okay, then the narrative description that I'm writing is what is occupying the frame of my movie. It's not the same thing as writing a novel. It's literally, I am telling you right now what is on the screen. So if I want a close-up on his hand, I can describe something about his hand that's filling the screen that implies a close-up without me having to go in there and tell you what shots I want.
Close on, right? It's a lot of, it's like stylistic guidelines along with technical definitions. I think section 3 and section 4 are particularly strong. In my video in section 4, specifically just good rules of thumb, good practices like vivid verbs, setting the mood with one great detail. Like instead of telling us 5 details of the scene. No, just tell us the one image, the one sound that defines the feeling of the space, and then get into the action, right? Like, just respecting the reader, stuff that like that is intuitive, but like laid out can really save people a lot of time, because you'll learn this stuff eventually, but you'll save yourself a lot of time if you know this going into it.
Writing the
Determine
scene
emphasis through levels of abstraction. I'll just sort of go into this one, where what I mean by that is, if you just write, oh, the dog walks by, that's very abstract. What is a dog? Whereas if you say the mangy mutt with 3 legs, oh, we went specific. The camera has focused on that. The reader has focused. Oh, that's important. And determine emphasis means focus on what's important by how specific you are versus how vague you are, right? If you tell us a mangy mutt with 3 legs, shuffles between the character's legs, oh, that dog's going to be important. And if it isn't, you should not describe the dog as such. You should how you describe things focuses the reader's attention on what's important, what's not important. That's just one of the things we get into in writing the scene.
We talk about that. Parentheticals. So basically this here really shows the way that we approach screenwriting and writing the feature course overall, which is we try to get into the stuff. We try to be really, really specific about the lessons that John learned over the years, Adam and I have learned over the years, that other people have told to us over the years, all of the best practices and stuff about screenwriting that that you need to know, or that eventually that professional screenwriters kind of know instinctually at some point, but you have to learn. We've attempted to really break down in this course. I particularly like writing the scene. I know that's the free one, but I particularly like it because this was the kind of stuff that I felt like when I was first trying to learn how to do screenwriting, I felt like I wanted this level of detail. I wanted someone to tell me not just like, okay, this is the arc of the story, this is how it works. I wanted someone to tell me specifically, like, this is how you write a good scene, literally with examples. This is like what good scene description can be. These are ways to think about it at the very least. Like, here are some ways to use the tools at your disposal, blah, blah, blah. Here's a question from JR that says, do you discuss secondary characters and subplot?
Yes. In writing the feature. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I will find it for you. And then Adam, you can answer this one in the meantime.
Yeah. So if you've signed up for writing the feature, it's available to you forever. And if you still want to submit for feedback, that's totally fine. So go for it.
Mm-hmm. We call the sub characters, we call them friends and enemies, because again, it's like everything that you do
related to the protagonist.
Everything is about how they're related to the protagonist. So secondary characters are either, at their core, they're either friends or enemies of the protagonist. And I mean, they can also be friends that appear like enemies or enemies that appear like friends. There's all these different variations you can do in there, but again, everything is about how it relates to the protagonist.
And I just want to add in, we also both know that there are movies that have multiple plot lines that don't intersect. This approach to screenwriting, John's approach to screenwriting, is very specifically protagonist centric, which is 95% of movies, but it's not 5% of movies. So we just wanted you guys to know, we know this. John knows this. This course is designed to teach people the best practices of writing a protagonist-centric movie. Yes, and he strongly advises not to have 2 protagonists in a movie. We know that there are stories like, if you ever watch Magnolia, there's 6 interweaving storylines and all of them are important. And could you say there's one protagonist? No, but we're not talking about that type of movie. There's a lot more you can learn as a beginner from learning how to tell one character's story really well.
And because we might as well, I mean, you'll see this in other young screenwriters courses, but I'm going to show you sort of the format of how the lessons are set up, and we can use the one that JR asked about. just as an example. So this would be the one where we're talking about who are friends and enemies. We start with a little explanation. You get to watch videos. Every single video has a downloadable PDF of the transcript. All of them also have closed captions. We go into intertwining B stories. That's a separate little lesson. And then every single thing ends in key takeaways that is really a synopsis of what you just learned, to help cement it and how it relates to other parts. So we include descriptions here. A lot of times what we also do is we include frequently asked questions. So if we got a question a lot about, like, for clarification or something like that, we often tacked these in here. We are always open to elaborating more. So as writers have asked us more, or as we've thought of additional questions, we've added them in. So, like, can you have a lot of them? Like, sure, but here's some things to consider as you do. Should even minor characters have arcs? Can I introduce them in Act 1, or is this exclusively Act 2? Blah, blah, blah. So I hope that that helps show a little bit about what inside of this course is like.
Yes, and let's go to the final weeks. After carding and sequencing, your first draft.
Yep.
This week is all about preparing people to go from carding to the first draft. Like, and we're imagining that you took writing the scene here. So it's more about story notes, macro things to consider, psychologically, how do you push through a first draft? How do you overcome sort of the difficulty of stasis? How do you actually finish it? All of that stuff. And in the following week of that, let's push on. Revisions. What do you need to know? This is one of the most important weeks in the entire course. But what do you need to know, really, to edit your own work? You know the saying, great writing is rewriting. Great writing is rewriting. It's so true. Your ability to rewrite and to edit your own work, it will be how good it is. And so this is I think one of the most important weeks in the whole course. How do you polish dialogue? How do you fix exposition? How do you respond to notes? One of the best videos, I think. And what's next? Yep. We focus on, this is John's like mini business of screenwriting moment. Like, how do you get representation? How do you take specific pitch meetings, competitions? His and a little pep talk at the end. Hopefully some people enjoy. But yeah, that's
we get into the psychological side of it too. We talk about things like, how do you find community? How do you fight isolation as a screenwriter? Like, it can be kind of a lonely thing. Like, how do you network? We really try to get into everything that we can, and this is a lot of John's philosophy on that. I guess a few notes that I want to throw on top of this is that we recommend that as you go through it, if you basically, we're telling you about a puzzle, and every single piece is connected to every single piece. So it's difficult because if you pull one piece out, if you don't have one piece, the whole thing crumbles, right? It's like, it's a very interconnected, intentionally, it's a very interconnected system of storytelling. And what that means is that as you're learning it, there's going to be things where you're like, well, I'm missing the other details. We can't just, like, unfortunately, we can't just download it all into your brain at once. So there's kind of this is sort of like a psychology of going through the course, trying to, like, accept that you're going to learn things slowly over time and that we will get to everything is really important. So advice that we give to people is that if you aren't able to complete the project every single week as you go, we recommend continuing anyway. Like, don't let yourself get stuck saying, I don't know what my midpoint's going to be yet, so I'm not going to move on to this, to week 5. I'm going to stay on week 4 until I know what my midpoint is. We really recommend that you push through all the way up to week 8, which is drafting, because we have a lot of techniques in this drafting week that can help you figure out what's happening in between each step. We recommend that you just push through so that you have all the information at your disposal, rather than getting hung up on things before you have all the pieces. Something else worth mentioning is that, I know we've said this before, but at the end of the day, this is like this is John's advanced writing feature course at NYU, but with us pushing him to go deeper and to be more specific and to really focus on the theory, on like the philosophy and the application of that. So,
and also very dense. Rather
yeah.
than like getting an hour on one topic, we get him to say it in 7 minutes.
Yeah.
You know,
And I mean, and I paid $21,000 for this course at NYU.
painful.
So yeah, it kind of hurts my soul. But yeah, we try to keep it. We're all about keeping it as accessible as we possibly can, which is why it's priced what it's at. It's not because that's what we think it's worth. It's because we truly want to. A big part of why young screenwriters does what we do is because we think that we need more stories in the world. Like, more people need to be able to tell their stories, and unfortunately, film can be somewhat of an exclusive medium. Not everybody has access to film resources, and of course that's changing as we get, like, people can shoot things on their phones, but we want to be a part of helping that become a tool that's available to everybody, a storytelling tool that's available to everybody. So that's why the price is what it is, not because we think that that's what it's worth. I think that that's basically everything. I was also going to show you briefly. This is the tentpole document that we keep talking about. I can send you this link, but it's in the vault. If you look in the vault, you can see blank one there. So if you go into the vault, this is where the link will take you. You can go to tentpole documents. You see the blank one there. You also have elements of story, which is filling in what each of them mean. So this is available whether you take the course or not. This is completely, use it, poke around in the vault, read what you want, do what you want.
It's the skeleton, you know.
Yeah, but this is kind of what we're talking about. This is a story right here, and this is what you're building towards as you're writing a story. So that's that. And then we did want to briefly mention a brand new offering that we have for the first time ever, called Story Consulting, which this is something that that Adam and I have been asked about a lot. We get emails about people asking for more specific feedback on their work from us directly, and so we finally put this together to offer that to you. And this is something that is, people go through writing the feature and have never needed this. This is something that, like, if you want it, it's available to you. I think it's a good resource to have, but do not consider it like absolutely necessary.
For sure.
We're all about we're trying to just give you the tools you need, and we will always be very direct about.
Some people find it very, very helpful to talk out their story and get sort of FaceTime, and not just with us, but like with writers who, have written stuff before. The other option, if you don't want to spend money on the consulting, is the Discord. We have open workshops every Thursday where you can submit some of your written work. And we have also our writer's room, which is on behind Patreon, which is $12 a month, where you have access to the Tuesday workshop as well. But the Thursday workshop in Discord is free for everybody. Discord is the place. It's the place.
Let me see. I would honestly, if I'm being completely upfront with you, I would recommend that you come poke around our that you come join us for open workshop, the free open workshop. If you like it, check out Writer's Room, and then if you like it, then consider consulting. That's kind of my
and all the money from the Patreon goes to just covering the costs of hosting young screenwriters courses and stuff. Like, you see, it's like $300 a month. It's like, stuff. It's
oh, sorry, I
you're
didn't mean to show
supporting
you this side of it.
Yeah. You should have said that side, but it's kind of the yeah. We can say more about the workshops we have, sure. So, hosted on our Discord server, which is available, which we've linked extensively. Every Thursday, we have an open workshop where we alternate between once a week. We alternate between taking in open scene submissions that we all do readings of with a group of people. Like, you can sort of share 5 pages maybe of something you're working, the opening scene of what you're working on, and we'll do a reading of that scene, and you get to hear your own work for free. Every Thursday we host that. And we alternate open weeks with writing a prompt. So sometimes we have a writing prompt that everybody will write a scene, like okay, you have to write a dinner scene with 2 characters where there's a misunderstanding, and everybody comes in and shares a screen. We do a reading of that screen. So Thursdays are readings of either prompt scenes or open scenes that anybody can submit what they're working on, a scene from whatever their projects are. Tuesday is accessible to people who are members of the Patreon, the Writer's Room, where we do the same thing, where we have projects or open prompts and open submissions, but we also take more holistic view. We want to start taking a more holistic view towards people's writing portfolios in general. And sort of, you can ask us any questions you want in the private Discord. Alexie is showing us right now. This is the Discord. She's showing the open workshop. Now, this can seem very confusing for somebody who hasn't seen Discord before, but we promise it all makes sense with the intro into it. This is it's a great space to connect with other writers and do these 2 workshops. Thursdays, open workshops. Tuesdays, the Patreon workshops, which we focus more on.
I can grab you an invite link too, so you can sign up to the Discord, but then I'll also grab that invite link for everybody.
We have topics for the workshops sometimes, but the Thursday is specifically about reading out work that writers in the community are sharing. Tuesday, we do workshops on certain topics occasionally, and we do it on YouTube here. If you ever have a question about something, guess what? Us and the community will answer it. It's a very generous group of people.
So this is what I just sent you the invite for. This is coming up next Thursday, and it's an open table read. Anybody can come. Basically, you can share something that you're working on, and we will read it. We will read up to 5 pages aloud and give you some feedback on the spot on what you're working on. So this is another thing that's always available to you. And then there's the Writer's Room version, which is more focused on your portfolio, and that's the Patreon that Adam was talking about. Those are Tuesdays. So yeah, I think that covers about everything. But again, I guess I know that was a lot that we just told you about at the very end. So to summarize, if you want to write a movie, writing the feature is a really, really excellent place to start. Yes. If you're concerned about, like, if you aren't familiar with us, or you're concerned about the price, or you just like want to make sure that it's going to be for you, we recommend taking one of our free courses first. Writing the scene is going to be really, really close to what you're going to be getting from writing the feature. Writing the short is sort of an introduction to how John teaches and in his philosophy. So you can take those for free. If you wanted to take writing the feature and you really, really enjoy the feedback that you get from the course and you want more, you have the option to poke into script consulting if you want, or to join our Patreon for Writer's Room. And anybody, anytime, can come to our Thursday workshops. We alternate weeks. One week we read whatever you want. One week we give you a scene prompt. It's for like a challenge to help practice your skills. I think that's everything.
Cool. Well, thanks so much. We will see you all next week. We have, as we mentioned, copy class as always on Fridays here on YouTube. We've got our open workshop this Thursday to anybody who wishes to join. Bring in we'll do it. Just follow the community and we'll hear us act. Just follow the community guidelines and post in the Discord. And you should be good.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Hope that you have a great rest of your Saturday.